Okay, so because okay, so I'm talking about spirits, um, metamental, metaconscious. I should preface the whole thing on the idea that all information is physical. That's the stance of physics. I think that must be accepted. I gave it a lot of thought and realized that the experiences of my life that gave me pause in accepting that were sort of contradicted by a lack of a consideration about those experiences themselves in the context of physical information. And once I did that, once I accepted that all information was physical, and then I considered the spiritual, we're just going to call it spiritual because it's common, situation, that's when the experience really got going. And I realized that the sort of metamental entities that exist with humanity exist on a kind of multiphasic sort of array within the human mind. There is, of course, a history of spirituality, of humankind, of the earth, of everything. So here's the crucial point, is that fundamental pattern I must accept has a consonant effect contextually to itself, if that makes any sense. So these entities, these paths of belief, I need to drink water. These paths of belief that people follow and that are these standardized forms of consideration of existence that guide the conscious mind to reach the metaconscious state and thereby to interact with spirits, blah, blah. Though many of us know that it doesn't require a path. I had experiences young of foreknowledge and connection and these sorts of things without any, it was as though there was an entity that was, and I can go on and on about this, but I'll try to just stay on one avenue here. The point is that these entities, they have a way of interacting with the mind that sort of seems to obviate the mind's natural structure. But the truth is that it doesn't. There is no obviation. There's no they can't get around how the mind is. But they can do much with the mind that is bizarre and absurd. The point is that all of the ways in which a human brain develop they sort of, it's as though these entities, once they are connected to an adult person, have a certain modality of existence, and they seem to not comprehend that it's not limitless, that it's relative to the mentality of a human brain, which is defined by the developmental process of the body and therefore brain. But they don't seem to really understand time at all, or at least they're not allowed to engage with that consideration. So it's weird that there's rules, but there seems to be rules. And since they don't really interact with time as a concept, they don't have the ability to, which is a good thing, they don't have the ability to completely leverage the human brain, because they cannot reconcile the like multimodal perspectives that a mind creates by development from infancy to adulthood. So the impression that I get from these entities is that their position on the idea that their existence is manipulable by like some kind of artificial brain organ that could be created by humanity. Their position on that is that it would be ineffective. And that position seems to be derived from a sense that they have like a total influence over the human mind. And it's so deeply clear that they have no concept of the developmental barriers that the human brain is composed of, which makes sense. I mean, the metamental is clearly necessary for human survival. Clearly, we wouldn't have survived if it was possible to completely modify the human brain by these entities or whatever. So, this may all be very difficult because it contains so many concepts that need to have been considered beforehand. But these entities are real. They are common. They are vastly at the behest of the female half of the population, which I think is the whole story of the Tree of Knowledge and Eve and the snake and all that, which is such an ironic story, because on the one hand, it's like, hey, that's your fault. On the other hand, perhaps it is. And then, thirdly, the idea is that that's all that's said. So there's enormous realms of description that can still be made about what that is and what they know and how that is. I just want to mention really quick how bizarre it is, the Bible, because it's my cousin is texting me. Because in the beginning there's light, right? And it's like, God, the Big Bang. Oh, that's cool. And then Adam and Eve. And it's like Adam made Eve from his rib. Here's the thing. So the Y chromosome degrades over time. When I first heard that, I was like, oh, everything's so sad for men. But it's, I mean, in this time. But there's animals. There's a shrew in Japan that's already lost its Y chromosome. And it mates just fine. They thought that it was, that the Y chromosome, provided the factors chromosomally to delineate, or to designate sex, gender, but it doesn't. The shrew only has an X. There's male shrew. The Y's gone, and it still differentiates sex. It still does everything. So then the question is, chicken or the egg? I'm just going to throw that at you, and it's always the egg, like our man Neil deGrasse Tyson says, and of course he's right. It's the egg first, because the bird that laid the chicken egg was not a chicken, and I like the way he says that too, and it's true. So every beginning of a species begins with one individual, and there's examples of extratemporal co-currents of evolutionary appendages, like eyes have evolved separately, and blah 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 blah. It's clearly a result of the pressures of the code and the world and the needs of the ecology, blah blah blah. We all know that, but it's difficult to imagine how the genetic aberrations that occur from the scenarios within which one individual has, you see where I'm going with this? The new genetic code of a new species, how that would be possible, how speciation could ever even occur with one individual beginning it, and then one considers the Y chromosome degrading over time, and then one recognizes, wait a second, so I'm not certain if we've ever witnessed a brand new species of a kind that uses these chromosomal dynamics of X's and Y. But I think if we did, I think we'd find that the first was always male. Perhaps most successfully? Because it seems like that degradation of the Y chromosome means that at the beginning of the species, the Y chromosome had a factor to it that was much more of such a much of what we don't know. And what I'm suggesting is that that factor is what helps the species avoid the genetic aberrations that occur when the circumstances and scenarios of one individual having that new, in our case, advantage clearly of that new genetic code is the progenitor of the rest. So it's either far more likely that a male human creates the new species lineage, or it's necessary. And either way, it's still a very strange wisdom in the Bible and ye old Bible to say that Eve was made from Adam's rib. And by the way, these paths of belief that lead to spiritual connection are such a much of perspective, and for the mind to generate many perspectives of the same information in order to build a multimodal, like middle perspective that at the same time the metamental spiritual entities, mentalities, minds are likewise following. And so that's sort of the line that leads to that connection. So women, so the question is, what is a perspective and what creates a perspective? And we know that women develop sexually earlier than boys. We know that they have a very strange and mysterious connection to these monthly cycles. And that's, automatically you gotta, for a thinking human being, that generates quite the perspective. And many other bodily attributes that sort of build a sense of another perspective. And ergo, it's vastly likely that a woman was the first to become aware of a metamental existence. And so it's like, because of these paths of belief is how the mind creates the sort of pathway to the metamental, to the spirit. And if information is physical, but it is also like intraphasically consonant of pattern, that actually goes a long way to describe evolution itself, and tie in a lot of philosophies that have been described, as well as a strange concept of sort of a galactic, or even beyond, like a completely fractal resonance at all levels of reality within that phase of meaning, that contextual pattern of meaning of existence, where it describes reality as a vast creation that negotiates individually along lines of meaning and value simultaneously and yet separately. And then you can get into relativity and start talking about light. The best way I can describe it, and I am reaching the end here of this talk, the best way I can describe it is that, what is it, energy over the diminution of the relationship between energy and mass as a, what is that called? Exponential, as an exponential diminution is equivalent. No, not as is equivalent, but is directly, like, let's go with contradicted again, by the speed of light. So the electromagnetic spectrum, the entire thing, is like the pivot by which every other experience physically diminishes thereby relatively. Which is a weird way to say that. You'd have to have thought a lot about relativity before that might mean anything to you in the context of the rest of this. And furthermore, these patterns, so I'll say one more thing. These patterns, like I am a pattern of myself, but also in my own mind. I'm a pattern. So these entities are intraphasic patterns of identity that exist. And of course, I must have a pattern of my mother and other people in my life, just mentally, not to mention whatever spiritual situation is happening. Otherwise, I could not recognize her, you see. So the mind is already made to contain multiphasically, this is what I'm saying, descriptions of identity, and thereby cognizance. Ooh, I'm getting an order. I mean, a delivery order. I'm getting an order. Stupid. So I'm going to put this up, and that'll be fun.